15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois, to kill again. The year is 1963, the night, Halloween. Police are called to 43 Lambkin LN, only to discover that 15-year-old Judith Myers has been stabbed to death by her 6-year-old brother, Michael. After being institutionalized for 15 years, Myers breaks out on the night before Halloween. No one knows, nor wants to find out, what will happen on October 31st, 1978, besides Myers' psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis. He knows Michael is coming back to Haddonfield, but by the time the town realizes it, it'll be too late for many people. He was institutionalized, and according to his doctor, Sam Loomis, is the personification of evil. On the day before Halloween 15 years later, Myers manages to escape and heads for his hometown. On Halloween night, he goes on a rampage while Loomis and the local sheriff search Myers' neighborhood for him. Meanwhile, Laurie Strode, a serious student who rarely goes out on dates, is babysitting a neighbor's child. Little does she know the danger she is in. On the anniversary of the brutal murder, Michael escapes from Smith's Grove Sanitarium, a mental health facility for the criminally insane, and returns home. And before long, Michael becomes fixated on blissfully unsuspecting high school student Laurie Strode and her friends, Annie and Linda. In the meantime, Myers' psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, and skeptical Sheriff Lee Brackett comb the town to ferret out the mentally unstable inmate. However, the shadows are thick, and the silent killer is always one step ahead of them. Has Michael Myers returned to pick up where he left off? 21-year-old Michael Myers steals a car and escapes Smith's Grove. He returns to his quiet hometown of Haddonfield, Illinois, where he looks for his next victims. Dr. Wynn doesn't think Michael could drive to Haddonfield and blames Dr. Loomis for not warning the staff about the potential for Michael's outburst. Dr. Loomis angrily gets in his car and drives away. Later that day, Laurie sits in English class at Haddonfield High School when she sees the Smith's Grove Sanitarium car parked on the street outside the window. Michael stands beside it, in a grayish-white mask, watching her. Laurie is frightened and continues to look back, when suddenly, the teacher calls on her to answer a question, startling her. Laurie responds to the question, and when she looks back through the window, Michael and the car have disappeared. Meanwhile, at the Haddonfield Elementary School, the bell rings and children begin running out of the building. Tommy is leaving school carrying a large pumpkin, followed by several bullies who are taunting him about how the boogeyman is coming to get him that night. Tommy's confused, not knowing about the boogeyman, but is also frightened. He begins to run away, but he trips and falls, squashing the pumpkin. The bullies laugh and run out through the playground gate, when instantly, Michael jumps out and grabs one of them. Terrified, the bully scurries away. Michael climbs back into the Smith's Grove Sanitarium car and begins to drive alongside Tommy, who is walking down the sidewalk sadly. Michael then drives off. On the highway somewhere between Smith's Grove and Haddonfield, Dr. Loomis stands at a telephone booth, speaking with someone from the Haddonfield Police Department, who seems resistant to the idea that Michael could be coming to Haddonfield. Dr. Loomis, frustrated again, hangs up the phone, but before he can drive away, he notices a tow truck parked nearby in a grassy area. Inside, he finds Michael's white hospital gown and the rabbit in red lounge matchbook. Now Dr. Loomis is sure that Michael is in Haddonfield and rushes back to his car, not noticing the unclothed body of the tow truck driver lying in the nearby grass. Meanwhile, the students are being released at Haddonfield High School. Laurie is walking home with her friend Linda, who's complaining about how many school activities she will have to be involved with in the next day, being such a popular and beautiful girl. Laurie, however, seems to be a quiet bookworm who has nothing to do except babysit. As they walk along, another young girl named Annie Brackett. Annie and Laurie talk about their babysitting assignments for that night. Laurie is babysitting Tommy, and Annie is babysitting Lindsay Wallace, who lives across the street a few houses away. While they are talking, the Smith's Grove Sanitarium car goes speeding down the street. Annie yells down the street at the driver that speed kills, and suddenly, the car stops but instantly speeds back up and leaves again. Forgetting this matter and not realizing that they had a close encounter with Michael, Annie and Linda share a cigarette and begin devising a plan to get Linda and her boyfriend, Bob, together at the Wallace house where Annie is babysitting, when suddenly, Laurie sees Michael hiding behind a bush ahead of them. Annie doesn't see him, and when she rushes over to the bush, there is nobody there. Annie thinks that Lori is seeing men behind bushes because she is desperate for a date. Annie reaches home, leaving Lori behind, who still thinks that there was someone behind that bush. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis and Mr. Brackett arrive at the abandoned Myers house. They begin to search inside. When they find a partially eaten dog, Mr. Brackett says a man couldn't eat a dog like that, and Dr. Loomis replies that this isn't a man. The two of them walk upstairs, and Dr. Loomis shows Mr. Brackett the bedroom where Judith was murdered. Suddenly, a downspout falls away from the building and breaks the window near them, startling Dr. Loomis, who draws his gun. He begins describing his March 15th, 2024 experience of watching Michael, seeing nothing but pure evil inside him. Mr. Brackett asks what they should do, and Dr. Loomis tells him to inform the rest of the police, just to ask them to keep their mouths shut. Dr. Loomis decides to stay behind and wait for Michael because he thinks he will return to the Myers house. Mr. Brackett drives away, now truly believing what is going on upstairs. At the Doyle house, Tommy and Lindsay run up to Lori, thinking that it was the boogeyman who attacked her. She assures them that he is dead, but Tommy says that she couldn't have killed him because he is incapable of being harmed. At this moment, Michael lumbers toward them, and Tommy and Lindsay run back into the bedroom. Lori scurries into another room, opening a set of doors leading to the balcony and, hiding in a closet, tries to fool Michael as to where she actually is. She ties a pair of stockings over the closet's doorknobs, but Michael soon begins shaking the doors and reaches through them with his knife, slicing the stockings. He breaks down the top half of the closet door and reaches in for Lori, accidentally turning the light on. Lori grabs a wire hanger and stabs Michael in the eye with its point. He jumps back in pain, dropping the knife into the closet. Lori takes it, clutching it in her hands, and stabs Michael in the chest. He falls to the ground, dead. Lori carefully slips out of the closet and, seeing this, drops the knife, asking Tommy and Lindsay to come out. She tells them to go down the street to the Mackenzie's house and tell them to call the police. They leave the house, screaming, attracting the attention of Dr. Loomis, who is outside and runs up to the Doyle house. Inside, Lori is slumping against the doorway of the room where she was hiding, tired and almost unconscious. She doesn't notice that Michael, thought to be dead, is slowly rising behind her. Lori stands up, leaving the room, when suddenly, Michael grabs her by the neck and begins to strangle her. Lori fights back and pulls his mask off, revealing Michael's true face. Instantly, Dr. Loomis appears at the top of the staircase and shoots Michael with his gun. Michael falls backwards into another room as Lori falls against the wall behind her, covering her ears. Dr. Loomis chases the murderer into the other room and sees him standing in front of the balcony doors. Dr. Loomis shoots him 5 more times, causing him to fall out the doors and off the balcony. Michael slams onto the ground below, appearing to be dead. The doctor looks back at Lori, who says, "It was the boogeyman." Dr. Loomis solemnly replies, "As a matter of fact, it was." Looking back down below, he sees in horror that Michael has vanished. But Dr. Loomis knew all along that this would happen. Lori realizes that Michael still is not dead and begins sobbing. Myers, the legendary man who came home on Halloween night to kill, is still alive somewhere out there. As he took his sister's life, the police found a silent boy dressed as a clown at the scene. When one stumbles upon a growing fire, one does not pour gasoline on it. But this was an action taken by officials that had no idea how it would shape this demon in the boy's body. Sending Michael to a mental institution was a feeble attempt to save the child. Unsuccessful therapy and nightly screams just made him even more introverted and deranged. People hoped that Michael Myers would end up a parenthesis, soon to be forgotten and buried, a failure that soon were to rot away. But then, he escaped.